Recognize this dress? What about this one? Surely you recognize this one. This dress seems to have imprinted itself on the Western world's cultural imagination. It's in our fantasy media, it's in our art, even the silhouette made a comeback in English Renaissance fashion. But is it all fantasy? Or is there an actual historical piece of clothing where it all started? Hello, I'm V, and here we make really old clothes. Yes, this medieval princess dress comes from a real historical garment worn by people of all genders, and it's called a bliaut. It appears to have been a Norman French fashion before spreading throughout Europe and existed in the 12th century, possibly as early as the late 11th century. The evidence for that is a bit thinner, despite what a very enthusiastic past V might have said in a video about getting dressed in the 11th century while Jewish. But it does exist! Join my Patreon and you can have my entire bibliography. Either way, I want one. Speaking of historical accuracy and sources, let's have a quick chat about project goals. Our sources for bliauts are mostly art, illuminations, and sculptures, which are very short on construction details and have led to some intense debate about how these things were actually put together. This picture doesn't exactly show seam lines or armhole curves, so given I don't think we have any extant bliauts, we don't really know how they were put together. They had big sleeves, that's the earliest thing that sets them apart from other gowns. We know they often had fitted bodices. Just look at the definition here. And we're pretty sure they had side lacing to get those fitted bodices. Everything else? Who knows? Not us. Also, I do not like the idea that there was some one true way to pattern and cut out a dress in the Middle Ages. Maybe that makes more sense today when things are being mass-produced and information on how to cut out a t-shirt is available within seconds on the internet. But things were not universal in medieval Europe. The spread of information worked very differently. Dressmakers would have their own methods, or local or regional practices. And different sizes of people would need different cutting layouts and piecing and things to minimize fabric waste. If you were a little short on yardage, you would still get whatever you could out of it, even if it meant changing your pattern. So that already means we can't have a perfectly historically accurate bliaut, which is fine, because that's not what I'm going for anyways. I want something historically plausible. Yes, I want to make something that's recognizably a bliaut for a late 11th or 12th century English Jew. But what I really want is to make that dress out of this very non-historically woven pink wool crepe I found for $6 a yard using a sewing machine. There may come a day when I aim for the highest degree of accuracy known to costumer kind, but today is not that day. Today, I want a pretty pink dress to run through the forest in. I'm making a pattern/cutting diagram on graph paper since this is still mostly a dress made out of geometric shapes. There will be 2 main body rectangles, each the width of my shoulders. If I had a larger bust, I'd use that measurement instead, but with some negative ease. These will be slit up to around the high hip and have triangular gores set in for the skirt. I got clever with the math for the gores and used a Pythagorean theorem calculator. If I'd made them my high hip to floor measurement from point straight down to hem, the angled sides would be too long for the split. Instead, I'll calculate backwards from that measurement and save myself some fabric and fuss. Okay, I finished my pattern. This is draft number 3. Let's talk about the whole thing because I am extremely proud of this layout. I have a 3.5 yard piece of fabric and I've managed to fit the pattern for this entire gown onto 2.5 yards of fabric, roughly. So here's how we've done it. Here are the body pieces. They're 15.5 inches wide. I'm gonna be sewing this on the machine with 1/4 inch seam allowances, so I don't really need very much available there. So there's that. They are both going to be slit 34 inches up the center to sort of like the high hip area, and they're gonna have gores put in. The gores are over here. I've used sort of a standard take a big rectangle and divide it into 3 triangles plus the 2 extra pieces on the end, which just get sewn together. So that's nice because it's fewer seams for me to sew. It also means that it's always going to be a bias edge, so a diagonal edge of a gore getting sewn to a straight edge
in one of the body pieces, so I won't have to worry about those seams stretching. Now, the sleeves, which are the part I am most proud of. Depending on the design, and it varied a bit by region, sometimes you would see like sleeves that went straight from the shoulder and were like this big triangular shape. Sometimes you would see sleeves that are sort of like tighter, normal shaped at the elbow and then flared. Sometimes you'd see sleeves that really only flared like sort of most of the way towards the wrist, and the cuffs were just very big. And sometimes they were pieced, and sometimes they might not have been, although to not piece your sleeves would require such a degree of fabric waste. I would be really surprised if 11th and 12th century people, even the upper classes, would have done that. So what I've done is divided my sleeve into an upper and a lower sleeve. The lower sleeve is mostly a geometric flare, but it's got a little bit of a curvy bit to the bottom, and very straight triangular shape up to about the elbow. The upper sleeve actually has a shaped sleeve head. I had to draw myself a basic sleeve block because I've been in straight rectangular construction land for the past couple months and I didn't have one. These were, I think, some of the first garments in Northwestern Europe where we would really expect to see that sort of shaped sleeve head and not the square sleeve head and underarm gusset. So it's got a very basically shaped sleeve head, and then I've managed to fit the upper sleeves in these triangular offcuts created by the big lower sleeves. They just barely fit, but this basically means that there's going to be hardly any fabric waste, and what there is going to be quite small pieces, whereas one of the previous layouts I had, there would have been these massive sort of like half yard by half yard chunks of cabbage. All this excess is just gonna come off in one big piece. So there we go. Gown notorious for fabric waste, cut with hardly any. Now that I have my cutting layout, all I have to do is transfer it onto the fabric. I don't usually make pattern pieces for geometrically cut garments. I just measure and draw out the shapes with a chalk pencil. With pieces this big, sometimes it's easier to cut as I go. I started with the easy seams, sewing the halves of the two-piece gore down the center, the upper sleeve seams, and the lower sleeve seams. Then, the shoulder seams on the two body pieces, which are quite short and marked with pins. As I go, I'm finishing the raw edges with machine overcasting. I'll hand fill some visible areas because I like the look, but this is quick, effective, and works with small seam allowances. To attach the upper sleeve to the lower sleeve, I'll insert the upper sleeve into the lower one with right sides together, match up the center seams, and pin.
The sleeve is small enough at the elbow that this is the only way to run it through the machine, so it takes some fussing. The sleeves are set into the body in pretty much the same way. Insert sleeve into body, right sides together, match seams, pin, and sew. It's a little weird because the side body seams on this dress are left open, and also because I didn't do a shaped armhole. I should have, but drafting arm side curves scares me, so I didn't. I mostly got away with it. I'm making some marks for neckline and gore placement. And then placing the side gores between the body panels. They'll be basted in just at the top to check the placement. It's starting to look like an actual dress. Now I know I'm happy with it, I can pin and then machine stitch the side gores all the way in. The front and back gores are trickier, since they're set into a cut rather than a seam. I'm using some of Opus Elena's method for inset gores, a few back stitches right at the top point, then bringing the gore around and setting the top by hand, or in my case, hand basting and machine stitching over it. As I put this dress together, I was thinking about what it would be like to wear such a culturally significant, admired dress as a Jew. We usually don't get to see ourselves in the dreamy historical settings that inspire fantasy films. Walter Scott's 1820 novel Ivanhoe, some serious 19th century medieval history bounding, is set in 1194 when bliauts were in fashion. Much of our romanticization of the Robin Hood myth comes from this book, and it features a Jewish woman as a chivalric heroine worthy of honor and protection. This is a vast improvement from works like Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. But as positively as Ivanhoe treats Rebecca about Isaac, her Judaism still stands between her and a happy ending. The book ends as she and her father leave England in fear of further persecution. In the 12th century, if she were real, or in the fantasized 19th century illustrations of Scott's novel, Rebecca might have worn a gown just like the one I'm making. When in my life had I seen myself represented in this setting, the fantasy of chivalric romance, without separating myself from my Jewishness? I don't think it's ever happened before. To mark the hem, I have a fancy gadget that puffs a line of chalk onto the dress at an even height. Then I can cut away the excess and cut out the neckline while I'm at it. I've seen other costumers use tablet woven or embroidered trim at the necklines of their bliauts, but I don't have those skills yet, so I'm using some contrasting burgundy wool to make a shaped neckline facing. I've never done one of these before, so this process is 100% improvised. Strips of the same wool will be made into a headband, a girdle, and trim for the sleeves. I also have to cut away excess fabric at the sides to shape the bodice. This wool will stretch a ton on a curved edge, so I'm reinforcing it with a facing strip cut on the straight grain. This is sewn on, then felled to the inside by hand. Then I'll add eyelets every 3/4 of an inch for the side lacing. After separating the fibers with an awl, the hole is held open using buttonhole stitches worked in wool yarn. From here on out, it's all hand finishing.
This isn't really for historical accuracy. I'm using modern cotton thread. But I do really love the clean and visible look of hand-finished hems and trim on wool garments. I find hand sewing very relaxing, so this works out for me. But you could just as easily use the machine to sew on a brocaded ribbon trim and have a beautiful gown regardless. When I first took an interest in Jewish historical clothing, instead of just historical clothing, I felt like I had to choose between representing my heritage or being able to simply enjoy frolicking in a pretty dress I'd made for myself. Jews have been subjected to so much oppression, and when we look at history, that's almost all we see. But I don't have to choose. We are more than our suffering. And Jewish clothing is more than the garments of affliction. So I will wear this dress that inspired hundreds of years of fantasy aesthetics, because it is the dress of my people too. And I will wear it with joy. If you have a favorite historical version of a fantasy outfit, tell me in the comments. And while you're at it, leave a like, subscribe for more frolicking through dress history, and join my Patreon for shiny bonus content like research notes and behind-the-scenes updates. Until next time, we're all just here to play dress up. Let's make sure everyone can get to the costume box.